Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and today we are joined by a visionary leader whose career spans 4 decades of reshaping industries and empowering entrepreneurs and proving that faith and business can thrive together. So meet John D. Marvin. He is the president and CEO of Texas State Optical, TSO, and that's a name synonymous with trust in eye care across Texas. And under his leadership, TSO has grown into one of the top 10 optical retailers in the United States, generating over $110 million annually, while helping young optometrists launch 85 plus practices through innovative mentorship and turnkey systems. But John's story isn't just about scaling a legacy brand, it's about leadership rooted in influence, not authority. And as a certified John Maxwell speaker and coach, he has spent decades studying the human side of business, fostering meaningful connections with teams, and guiding professionals to balance bold decision making with compassion. And from his early days in pharmaceutical sales to revitalizing TSO's physician owned model, his journey reflects a relentless curiosity. And I love that because I'm relentlessly curious myself. He's an advocate for lifelong learning, and he sets yearly reading goals and reflecting daily on growth, even writing books and hosting his own podcast on practice managing. Good morning, John. Welcome to Your Partner in Success, and thank you for being here with me today.
Well, good morning, Denise, and thank you for the generous invitation to join you and your audience.
Listen, anybody who is curious and teaching curiosity and lifelong learning, you're welcome. That's you, you're my kind of guy. So tell us a bit about you before we get started. Can you tell us about you and how you like to show up in the world?
Well, sure. I like to start with kind of one of my most uh, significant influences and early on, and that were my parents. And I grew up in Western Kansas in a very small town where my father was the local family doctor, owning a private practice there in Western Kansas. And I we moved there when I was in second grade, and I grew up, and all my formative years were in that small town environment. And I saw really had a front row seat, so to speak, to what was involved in private practice and how that impacted our community, and my dad's approach to that, and that had a lasting impact on me in terms of the way to connect with other people, because as a family physician, you're very involved in especially back in that time period, you're very involved in people's lives in a community like that, and so that had a big impact. However, I didn't want to go into private practice because, as I told him as a junior in high school, I said, I don't think I want to work as hard as you do.
Oh,
And
that makes sense.
yeah, I kind of, because when you're the local doctor, then there were many Christmases he did not attend. I mean, he was gone. He was at the hospital, either delivering babies or taking care of people. And I just didn't, that didn't appeal to me. So I went off to school and I studied business administration, and with a marketing concentration, and was always fascinated by the area of marketing because of its connection with consumers. And so I think probably early on, my curiosity was first honed in being curious about why people do the things they do when they make decisions to purchase that they do. And I found that fascinating that uh, people would make choices about different products or services and why they would, and how they came to make that decision. And so that aspect of consumer research really kind of evolved because of my curiosity and my nature of being curious. And so as I got out of school, I was needing to find something to do. And my father recommended that I look into the pharmaceutical industry. And I ended up taking a position with a large pharmaceutical company that out of the Midwest, and really enjoyed it because I kind of started on the ground floor, so to speak, with um, calling on family doctors about this line of products that this company represented, and I got assigned. My first assignment was Western Kansas, which was kind of fun because I used to tell people that my territory looks like my high school football schedule. I was calling on the same small towns that we used to play in football in high school, and of course they all knew my father, and so I had a real advantage there. Kind of my first uh, learning experience about the influence that people have being important to you, and the old adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know, and how that can influence a person's success, and the importance of networking and relationships and things like that. And so I enjoyed a couple of years of success with that, and um, then was given an opportunity to either move to Skokie, Illinois, outside of Chicago, uh, to accept promotion. And when you're in a company like that, if you turn down a promotion, then they don't give them to you twice. And so it was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, that I ended up in the eye care business. And I ended up going to work in for a large ophthalmology group, surgeons, and got to then at that point begin to apply my interest in consumer research, and understanding why people were making the decisions they were making when it comes to selecting an eye doctor and a surgeon. And that led me to an introduction of a company called Texas State Optical. And it was through research that I had been involved with that I discovered this company in Southeast Texas, and was really impressed with the fact that they had such large market share at the time. And so I got to know that company, and then when I left the surgical practice and went out on my own and started a marketing management firm, a small boutique shop, nothing expansive, but I took them on as a client and did a lot of research for Texas State Optical, and over 2 years. And when you do that kind of work for a client, you become intimately familiar with their business. And that led to meeting several of the franchisees. TSO at that time was a traditional franchise company, and meeting several of the franchisees who ultimately turned to me about 10 years later and asked for my help in acquiring the franchisor. And it was during that process that I was asked that if we were successful at acquiring the franchisor, then asked if I would come on as the new president of the company. And that was in 2001. And I've been president ever since. And my part of the appeal was knowing the customers as I did of the organization. I saw some real potential in it, but it needed some fixing up. And so, much like some people like to buy old houses and fix them up and sell them and turn them or rent them out, I thought, what a great fixer-upper project for this. And we kind of took or I kind of took that attitude when I took on the job in 2001, and have worked hard ever since to make it an organization that has the opportunity to realize its real potential in the state of Texas and delivering eye care for families. And, along the way, we've had a lot of ups and downs, and the industry's gone through some significant changes. And we're currently going through a major change now as an industry. And so the challenges don't ever go away. Even after 20 some years of leading the organization, we find ourselves needing to respond to the marketplace yet again. And all the time, I have the confidence that this is being driven through uh, making sure you stay close to your customers and you understand them and know how to best respond to them.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned that, people, why would they be referred to you? Well, maybe I'm putting my words in your mouth. My ophthalmologist was referred to me, and I mean in glowing terms, and I've never been sorry. But had I needed to go, and I did need to go find an ophthalmologist, I wouldn't have known where to start, and I wouldn't have known who to trust. So referrals, I think, are really part of the marketing.
Yeah, certainly. I would say that was absolutely and completely the case up until probably 2010. And
Really? What
yes,
happened
and
then?
well, the thing called the internet took a
Oh,
broader
yeah.
approach,
Well, I
and
live
it's
on the
a
internet. I feel silly
yeah.
for even asking because, as far as I'm concerned, God made the internet for me. I let y'all share it, but it's mine. So
Well,
keep
and
on
we're
going.
grateful for you to be so generous with that.
It's mine, mine,
Um,
mine.
well, but people today, it's interesting because in our profession, in our category, the most common search terms are eye doctor near me. And that will provide you with a set of options. And then people spend time reviewing, going through reviews. And it's fascinating to me that a person will consider strangers, the
Okay, did
reviews
I
of
lose you?
strangers. No, not that I know of.
I'm having
Am I?
trouble. No, I'm having trouble with my volume, but keep talking.
No, I said it's fascinating that people will trust the opinion of strangers in that are printed out on Google reviews more than they trust the experience of friends or family. And
That's a good point because I mean, I will look at Google reviews, but I don't trust them. Now, I do like what is it? Trustpilot. Now, I pay more attention to Trustpilot, but when it comes to somebody poking around in my body or in my eyes, I want to talk to somebody who's been there, knows this doctor, knows what their experience was. I mean, I didn't really want to go blind, and your eyes, they're important.
sure, and certainly there's that perspective. But if you spend any time in this marketing space, you realize that, and it's not just my sister had a great experience, and I look at one review for this doctor and it gives them 2 stars, and so I'm going to trust the 2 star review. But if I look at a doctor's profile and they've got 300 plus reviews and they're all 4.8, 4.9 stars, the fact that my sister went there and got frustrated because she got on time and they ran late that day and she didn't have a good experience, I'm going to put a lot of weight on those 300 other people who I don't know, but the repetitiveness of their comments and the things that they point out. I personally start by looking at all the negative reviews about anything. And if the negativity that I read about and negative reviews are about things that I don't care about, but the positive reviews are, then I will discount the negative reviews and go with the positive. But my whole point in it is that in a way, it's still referral. It's still a referral. You're just taking the opinion of people you've never met with the assumption and belief that these are people who are actual customers of the service, and not robots that have been or generated or family members of the doctor, and they've all gone in, put in different names and you trust it. You trust it. And then, of course, if that lines up with actual friends or family that have also had positive experiences, that's kind of a biased confirmation in that process, so that you tend to go with that. But and having sat behind the one-way glass and focus groups for years in this category, I can tell you that Google reviews have a tremendous amount of influence on people's selection. The other big thing, and this is something also that's relatively new, I would say in the last 15 to 20 years, is the certainly in our category of optometry, and that is the overriding priority of convenience of location, and which is going to be different, and largely it's it scales differently in different specialties. A family physician is going to be a little bit different than an optometrist. A cardiologist is going to be different than a family physician, and each of them have um, their distance of acceptability when it comes to making a selection. Um, I will I will travel a little bit farther for a cardiologist than I would for a primary care doctor. And
Well, that
because
makes
they're,
sense, right? That does make
yeah,
sense.
the significance of what they do, as well as the availability. I mean, they're in theory, you would think there were a lot more family physicians than there are good cardiologists. So you're willing to do that. But when it comes to optometry, we've learned that's about 3 miles in an urban setting, city setting. It's about 3 miles. That's kind of where the distance people will drive. Um, Part of it is because you'll end up passing 3 or 4 people when you get outside of 3 miles. There's no need to go 5 miles because there are so many available within a more convenient proximity. So
I would think that
it's,
would be the same for veterinarians.
yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
It's That's another fascinating area where it's always amazing me what people's relationship with their pets are.
Oh,
It
listen, I
with
am owned by cats. I'm a cat herder.
Yeah,
Not a
so
crazy cat lady yet, but I fully intend to grow up to be one. But in the meantime, I don't own this house. I just pay the mortgage. That's all there is.
yeah, there you go. And
I have
it's
opposable thumbs and
amazing.
they love me. Yeah, that is. I wanted to talk about leadership because that's really, I mean, you're a Maxwell certified speaker. So I guess my
Mhm.
question for you is, what's the most common leadership myth that you debunk in your coaching?
I think that we tend to associate the word leadership with superior, or you mentioned it in the intro, authoritarian. So if someone's got a vice president title in a company, um, and the people working in a department that are 1 or 2 levels below that person, they look to that vice president with the default of giving him a title of leader of their department. And that's not true. Now, they could very well be the leader of the department, but by simply having the title and that responsibility doesn't make them the leader. And because there are, within any organization, whether it be church or a small business, there are going to be people that have leadership influence that are not in positions of authority. And recognizing that influence and understanding what it is, how to get it, and how to um, use that type of influence for the betterment of the organization really is what creates leadership. And so the biggest misunderstanding of it is because so and so's got the title, then they're the leader, and that's not the case at all.
Oh, I agree with you. And I wanted to go back to TSO just for a second because the growth there under your leadership is remarkable. So, what's one leadership decision that you made that felt counterintuitive but paid off anyway?
Probably the idea that um, I could have an important role in building the company without having any authority over the necessary steps that would be required to do that. And what I mean by that is the first, for us to grow, we are a brand license company. And so we have no operational control. Um, and so young doctors or any doctor of optometry can license the use of the brand Texas State Optical from us. So my job really is twofold. One is to make sure the brand is worth paying for, and then and defining what that is and why that is, and then finding people that are interested in licensing that brand. And initially, the path to growth, in my view, was to find successful optometrists and persuade them to license the brand from us. And that turned out to be ridiculous. And it just kind of stunned me until I spent more time with that prospective customer and understanding what they needed, what they wanted, and so forth. And once I did that, then it became very clear to me as to what our best way forward was as a business model. And that is finding young optometrists that have never owned a practice, but want to. They want to own their own practice and helping them do that, and then utilizing our brand as a way of establishing credibility as a private practice. And so intuitively, it was like, I just need to go out and find these guys and be a super salesman and convince them they need to use our name. And when I went through that experience, I realized that was folly. That wasn't the way to go. And then it turned around that I had a much greater level of influence with young optometrists that really had never gone through that process before.
Well, that I wouldn't have even thought of that. But as you said earlier, you're constantly working in the business, working with the market, because markets change all the time. How we consume our information changes, how we find you changes. Everybody needs to take care of their eyes and their teeth, y'all. Take care of
Yeah,
everything. I'm
that's right.
telling you. I live in the South. Take care of your teeth. I wanted to ask you, when you're guiding yourself or your team through challenges, how do you balance empathy with accountability? Because it sounds like you have to go through this a lot.
Patience. I
Patience.
think, yeah.
Where do you buy that? I need to know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's something like muscles. You only get that by using it. You only strengthen it by using it. I'm often talked to one of the most common comments people make about me is, John, you've got the patience of Job. And I, okay, I understand what they're trying to recognize or say, but I don't look at it that way. What I look at it is more along 1 Corinthians 13. And if you think about the whole concept of love, and this will get a little, maybe little touchy feely, but I really do believe that um, we have to reach our own personal potential. There are two things that we have to do on a daily basis, and one is love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And that neighbor includes customers, it includes colleagues you work with, it includes the doctors I work with. And one of the elements required to express that love is patience. It says so in 1 Corinthians. And so having empathy for people is another way to me of saying you have love for people. And if you are to love your neighbor as yourself, which I believe you are, then you have to exercise all of those qualities. You got to be kind. You got to be gentle. You've got to be patient. You can't celebrate wrong. And so uh, knowing that or believing that in myself, it affects the way I work with my team members, my colleagues. And but it's not reflexive. I mean, it's something that I have to focus my mind on every morning and every day to remind myself that that's my commitment is to love these people. And,
Right.
people oftentimes are not lovable,
No,
but
I
that
do
doesn't,
understand that.
yeah, that doesn't provide an excuse. So,
No, and I was going to ask you how your faith informs your leadership style and decision making, but you got ahead of me, so thank you for that. But I
sure.
wanted to ask you, you said, I think you said this to me during our pre-interview. Yesterday is gone, tomorrow isn't promised. So how does this perspective shape how you lead TSO and how you lead your life in general?
Well, I think that for me, my life has to be rooted in faith and has to be built on faith. And faith and fear cannot coexist. And so faith says, I have no idea what tomorrow's going to bring. Because the only thing that about tomorrow that I know of is that it is something is that I can imagine it to be, right? I don't know it to be. I can only imagine it to be. And oftentimes, if we rely on our imagination as the way that we express and live our lives, oftentimes people default to imagination of fear. What happens if I lose this job? What happens if my wife doesn't love me? What happens if something bad happens? And so if you're going to live in faith, then what you do is you live in the present, and all you can do and control is what is happening now,
In
not
the
even
moment, right?
today.
In the
Yeah,
moment,
it's
yeah.
in the moment itself. Yeah.
Exactly. I get up every day. Well, I do it before I go to bed at night. When I eventually am able to go to sleep, it's not one of my big skills, but I lay out what the three critical things that I have to accomplish in that day. And I do manage to do that. But beyond that, I have no idea what's coming. My creativity may just go, ooh, and off I go. I'm out catching strings, yarn. It doesn't matter. As long as I'm working in gratitude, I'm okay.
Absolutely. And that's I started about 15 years ago, ending and starting and ending my day with focusing on a mindset of gratitude. So first thing in the morning, as I sit down with my cup of coffee, I make a list of the things I'm grateful for. And before I go to sleep at night, I go through my mind with a list of things I'm grateful for. Some of those things occurred in between those two lists.
Right, right.
Some of them are on same things are on both lists,
Yeah, I do the
but
same thing.
I find myself able to develop peace through that, and through that peace, I'm able to sleep more soundly. So I believe I agree with you. I think gratitude is one of the most important skills to develop is the ability to focus on gratitude.
And I had to learn it. I'm
Yes,
just still shocked
yes.
by I didn't realize how important this was. But now I have a gratitude journal. It's not even on my desk because I don't want to be in here when I'm doing it. It's on the table in front of my couch. And I will start out my day, what's new, what am I grateful for today? And sometimes I'm repeating what I put in there a week ago. And then I
Uh-huh.
have one next to my bed. It's on my bedside table because that's when I can go, "Ooh, look what I did today." So I'm keeping
What
track. I have to have the two because like, I'm already in bed. I'm comfortable. I've got a cat on my bladder. I don't want to move. So I just grab the nighttime journal and it does help me. And I'll tell you why. Years ago, this podcast is 17 years old. And many, many years ago, I had a gentleman on the show that he had been told basically had cancer and he had been told to go home and get his affairs in order. And he decided that he was going to do some of what the doctors, wanted him to do, but not all of it. And I think he said, "No radiation. I don't want to be cooked from inside." I believe that's what he said to me. But he embarked on what he called massive gratitude. And I perked up. I said, "What is that?" I didn't even know. I mean, I'm always grateful for the water I drink, I'm grateful for a lot of things, but it never occurred to me that I needed to express it, write it, say it out loud, and be very committed to it. And once I got off of that show, I said, "Well, how did you miss this?" I mean, I felt really kind of stupid. But once I incorporated that into my life, yeah, I wasn't as mean and nasty as I could be on most days. Let's just put it that way.
But one of the things that helped make this dynamic for me was I went through a course here a few years ago, and the person leading the course talked about giving gratitude away. And so I had been building my daily list, and I every day I list out five things I'm grateful for in the morning and then at night. But he said he introduced the concept of giving gratitude away. And what that means is that on that list of five things, one of them invariably is going to be a person, and at least one. And to take that and then write that individual text, email, handwritten letter, telephone call, but communicate with that person your gratitude for them and why. And I thought that's an interesting thing. And so I began to do that. And of course, I started with my spouse. Well, that was nice. But when I shared that with a colleague and said, "Here, I'm grateful for you in my life, and here's why," that took the relationship I had with that individual to a level that would have never been possible without that exchange of communication. And I began to see how gratitude shared can enrich and deepen the relationships that I have. And so I've made a practice of doing that. And it has been transformative in terms of the level of connection that I have with a broader group of people, many of whom are business associates and colleagues that I've always had a good relationship with, but there becomes a level of connection that wouldn't have been possible had I not done that.
And it's a simple thing,
Very
but
simple.
you have to think about, and I've had very similar things happen to me because, sometimes we always get in a hurry, right? We're always in a hurry. I've got to go do this. I've got this. I've got this list. I'm a list builder. And I would get the most amazing comments from people who have been on the podcast or clients or people I'm mentoring and say, "Oh, great. Thank you." And then off I'd go. I did not. And shame on me. It took me the longest kind of time to realize what I was missing, but I didn't take it seriously and I didn't
Yeah.
return it. And I probably lost a lot of time over the years by go, "Oh, great. Thank you very much." And then just zoom off I go. I
Yeah.
don't do that anymore.
Well, you're leading to another important attribute that I believe is important for another attribute I believe is important for a full of potential life, and that's intentionality. And you've got to be intentional about the things
Writing
you
that
want
down,
in your
intentionality.
life. Yeah.
Okay.
You've got to be intentional.
Right.
We all have great ideas and dreams and things that we hope to either be ourselves or accomplish. But if you're not intentional about going about developing those qualities in yourself or achieving what it is you want to, it'll never happen. Neither will happen.
And
You
it's
won't
not that
become
you're
more
being
spiritual.
selfish, right? It's not that you're being selfish, you're just not aware.
Yeah, and one day turns into a week, and a week turns into a month, and then pretty soon you're making the same list next January that you made this January.
Yep.
And it isn't because you're lazy or dishonest or anything else. It's just because you weren't intentional. Yeah, and that intentionality takes a dream or a wish and makes it a reality. Even if it's just, I want to become more connected with God. If you're not intentional about doing that on a daily basis, it won't happen.
I agree with you. I've got so many questions for you. I wrote down a whole bunch of stuff. So if I seem like I'm jumping around a bit, it's because I am, and we're going to run out of time, and I don't want to not get some of these points. But personal growth and lifelong learning. You set yearly reading goals. What book? Well, for right now, what book has most shaped your approach to leadership and why? And I know you worked with John Maxwell, so we're going to talk about that as well.
Mhm. Well, I would definitely say that if you ask me which book most shaped my understanding of leadership, it would be John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I think that that is been the most formative because what it did was it defined leadership for me, not in a theoretical or a conventional way, but it did so from a practical way. And so that once I understood it, then I could begin to learn it. And so that definitely would have the most influence on me.
What kind of books are you reading right now? Like, I am a voracious reader. I started reading when I was 3 years old, largely because, as my mother told my kindergarten teacher later on, well, we didn't tell her she couldn't read. I just picked up stuff and read it, spelled it out phonetically before anybody knew that was a thing. It's, there are words I can spell, but I can't pronounce them because I've never heard them. They, they just don't really exist in our language, but I can sure spell them. But reading to me is, if you want anything from me at all, give me a good book. Just give me a good book. I will be very, very happy with it. So, how do you, in your reading, how do you identify areas for personal growth with your reading?
Well, I take the week between Christmas and New Year's every year, and I use that for a period of reflection. I go through a daily process of reflection, of course, but that week I kind of use it to review the previous year and then look towards the new year in terms of a lot of different, I mean, but part of that is my own personal growth, what I want to accomplish from a personal growth standpoint. And I identify some areas that I would like to be better in. For instance, my 2025 area, I have 5 different areas that I want to become more knowledgeable, become more capable, and have a better experience with each of these topics and grow and develop them in my life. And so then um, I for each of those areas, I identify at least 5 books in each of those areas. And that's because someone told me one time, a coach, a mentor coach of mine said, if you'll read 5 books on any one subject, you'll know more about that subject than 99% of everyone else.
That is true. That is
And
absolutely
I
true.
and I thought that's insightful. I can read 5 books. I mean, who can do it? I mean, that's easy, right? And so, and it is if all you're dealing with is one topic, but I've got 5 areas. And in some of these areas, I've got 6 and 7 books that I found. Now, my objective for the year is to read 5. And, but, they include things like marriage and my relationship with my wife. Um, I'm a very focused on health and wellness. And so that's a category that I read. And Communication is another area that I frankly think I'm pretty good at, but I'd like to be better at it. And so I outline these, and then for each of those areas, in addition to books, I think about, well, is there any kind of workshop that I might sign up for? Or is there a conference someplace I might want to enroll in and attend? And so I kind of just plan it out as a project for myself, and then I break it down into what do I need to do daily to move me towards accomplishing all of that. And so I devote the first hour and a half. I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning. So the first hour and a half is largely devoted to reflection, gratitude, and reading. And so I've got some that I'm excited about. I try not to read more than two books at the same time, but it's a
Oh
little
no,
difficult
how do you
to
do
do.
that? I have
Yeah,
two iPads, one, one's in that room, one's over there. Each one has a different book going on it. I've got
yeah.
thousands of books in my house, in my garage, in my bedroom. Thousands. I just got a note from Kindle the other day, Kindle Unlimited, where I was reading literally 10 books a week, which I
Yeah,
couldn't
that's
do.
great.
Yeah, it was like, okay. Or was it 10
And
books a month? I can't remember. Whatever it was, I thought, no, they don't even know what I'm actually really reading. I'm reading a lot more than that. I'll read the back of a cereal box if that's, and I don't eat cereal, but if that's all that's in front of me and there's text on it, I'll read it. Don't give me a TV remote though. That's never going to happen. You've mentioned reflecting daily. So what is one question that you ask yourself at the end of each day to measure your growth?
what did I learn?
Ah, I think you
What
already
did I
told me
learn
that.
today?
Right.
And and I, this came as a result of something that I said to my children and I say to my grandchildren when I pick them up from school or I see them at the end of a school day. I'll ask them, what did you learn today that you didn't know this morning?
Oh, great question.
And they will look at me like, what? And I said, what did you learn that you didn't know this morning when you went to school? And some days they'll say nothing. And other days it'll cause them to think and they'll come up with something. And it's the thinking about it that I'm looking for. I don't care what it is that they answer, but I want them to sit and think, what did I learn today that I didn't know this morning? And so I just apply that same kind of reasoning or thinking to my own daily life. It's in my planner, it's in my journal that I keep a digital version of Franklin planner. And in the notes section of this digital planner, I've got it, I block off on the calendar an hour for daily review. And in that daily review, I will answer the question by writing out the answer. What did I learn today? And sometimes it's quick and easy, and other times I have to spend time thinking about it. And either way, it requires me to reflect and think about what it is I learned. And so that's how I go about doing that. And each morning I do it retrospectively. Like, what did I learn yesterday?
Mm,
What have I learned this week? Type of
understood.
thing. Yeah.
Right. And look, I have planners all over the place. I've had for years, I had a digital diary, if you were a digital journal, but I found that, it wasn't sticking with me, because I can type faster than I can think. And I was just, and I was just vomiting all over this poor thing. And then when I went back to read it, I was like, what was I really thinking? I had to go back to the written word because that sticks with me more and it slows me down because I really do have to think about what I'm putting to paper. Not everybody's the same, but that's what seems to work for me. So I wanted to ask you, and you know, how do you stay curious and adaptable in an industry as dynamic as healthcare? Because this is part of personal growth and lifelong learning, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I can't think of an industry that would be easier than maintaining curiosity with health care and health in general. Um, you know, healthcare is going through a transformative time period that I would say is greater than the transformation of the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the last century.
Which
And
industrial revolution? I think we've had three or four.
well, the time in the late 1800s
Okay,
to the early 1900s, when
right.
um, I don't want to say automation, but we went through a
Industry,
more of
yeah.
an
Industry was different.
agricultural based society to more of an
Right.
industrial based society.
Gotcha.
And that was significant. Back when the automobile was just something that scared horses, to the transformative nature of machinery and equipment
Electricity.
manufacturing, electricity, and things
Yeah,
like
that
that.
was a big deal.
Yeah. And today, in my mind, artificial intelligence is our version of electricity. How electricity radically changed life in the early 1900s, artificial intelligence is radically changing life in the 2020s and
Very
beyond.
much. Right. And
And
listen,
as
y'all, if you're not paying attention, you better. You need to pay attention. Okay, keep
and
going.
healthcare is going to be one of the most impacted areas of our lives by this transformation in the delivery and what healthcare. Right now, we've got a system of healthcare that is based solely on treatment. All of the financial incentives are in treatment.
But not in
There aren't,
health. It's
but
not
not
really
in
in
health.
health. I listen,
That's
I
right.
get that. We're not taught, lose weight. We're not taught how to eat properly or what kind of supplements you might need to, get in your system. We're not taught that. Kind of like when you're in high school, you're not taught how to, you know, have a bank account and make it sure that you're not bouncing checks all the time. There's so much that we're just not taught.
That's and so as these changes occur, uh, it's it, it's important that people ask why. Why is that happening? What is happening? And because it's hard to see it when you're in the middle of it. But
True.
50, 75 years from now, they'll look back on this time period and they'll look at it historically much like we look back on the early 1900s. And I just find that fascinating. I find it. I made the comment the other day to a doctor. I said, "This is a phenomenal time to be alive right now and to be experiencing this." And I find it just fascinating. And fascination is a part of curiosity. And so Bill Gates said the other day, it's in the New York Post was printed that he said in 10 years AI will replace doctors.
Yeah, I saw that, but I don't like Bill Gates. Just I'm gonna put that out there. I just don't like
I,
him, trust him.
whether you like him or not, you've got to admit he's probably has access to information that you and I don't
I
have as
agree.
it relates to artificial intelligence.
Right. And that's the only reason I'm willing to suspend disbelief for a little
Yeah,
bit. But I'm
yeah.
always
uh,
very iffy about what he's going to come up with.
well, I certainly don't think he's somebody to be listened to for instruction on health.
No.
But in terms of technology, I think
Yeah.
that he's
Yeah. I
got
agree with
some
you.
credibility in that area. And so now, whether I think it's going to be in 10 years or, but it's going to, it's not going to be 100 years. So, the reality is that there are certain things in our society that have no future in terms of
Oh, no,
uh,
that's
the
frightening.
the
You just,
traditional
I
in the
quit breathing
traditional
when you
way,
said that. I
in the
literally quit
traditional
breathing. That's
way.
scary. But you're right. I'm thinking now that, there's a lot of places where you can talk with a doctor online. You can talk with a veterinarian online. They can kind of sort of diagnose you. I've always found that a bit frightening, but I suspect that it will grow and become a lot more. important to people? I don't know. But like you, I'm curious to see how it all pans out.
Yeah. And I don't even know if it's going to be good for people. I don't
Well,
know if these
that's my
changes will be
question.
good.
Yeah.
I just know they're going to occur. And the first important thing of taking advantage of change is to recognizing it exists, and change is going on. Disruption creates opportunities,
It does.
but only if you accept the reality of the disruption. If you stay in denial and stay delusional and just cling to what it's always been, like, nah, that's terrible, I want it to be like it was in the 90s. Well, then good luck with that, because you'll never be able to take advantage of opportunity. And opportunity comes with first acceptance of the disruption and the changes. And I just think it's important, as someone with a responsibility of an organization, that I have to be real clear headed and not be intimidated or scared by change, but to learn how to constantly look for the opportunity in that change.
And that leads me to, having to learn how to distinguish between productive worry and unhelpful overthinking, which I think a lot of people are doing right now because there's so much going on in the world, not just the United States. There's so much going on that it can be absolutely disrupting and not in a good way. So I'll be honest with you, I don't watch news and I don't watch the TV. I'm very well aware of what's going on, but I'm not getting it through the television.
Well, that's probably wise. I can't say I've never watched news. I tend to, um, I prefer news that is actual informative and not opinion. What I find to be absolutely no help is to spend hours listening to people tell me what I ought to think about something.
Yeah, exactly.
And but if I pick up the local paper and it just tells me kind of what the city council is doing, and as long as it's reporting on facts, basically, I find that important for me because I'm a citizen. I have responsibilities and citizenship, but I don't need somebody to tell me, um, the talking heads, the infamous panel on the cable networks that have three people sitting at a desk and they're all pontificating about things they know nothing about. I don't find that to be helpful for me at all. So I don't watch that, but I'd rather sit and watch a good episode of Law and Order, frankly, than I would. At least I know I'm getting a story
Yeah.
that's made
Yeah,
up.
it was scripted. So, well,
Yes, that's
everything
right.
is these days. One of the things that you and I talked about, and ooh, we're running out of time. In our pre-interview, we had a nice chat, but you emphasized that we control what we think. And my question is, how do you train your mind to avoid negativity or self-doubt, particularly in high-pressure moments? And we all have them. Listen, I'm a highly committed introvert. I'm rarely around living people, but I meet people all the time online on this podcast. So you would think that I could avoid high pressure moments, but I don't. Nobody can. So, how do you train your mind to say, okay, Denise, stop and think about this before you open your mouth and put your foot in it?
Well, I can explain to you how I do it, and whether that's good for everybody or not, frankly, I don't know. But what I do is it starts with an intimate relationship with Scripture, and so that becomes kind of my anchor of truth, and so it enables me to check what I'm thinking against this anchor of truth. And if God says this, then it's true. And therefore, I can believe it and think it myself. And regardless of whether the environment I'm in at the time um, is consistent with that. So, for instance, I just went through an experience with a family member who was facing a really bad situation at their work, and posed the potential of them losing their job and their income and ability to provide for their family, et cetera, et cetera. And so the natural response in that is the stress and anxiety that comes with it. And the anxiety, I had another mentor friend that says depression is living in the past. Anxiety and worry is living in the future. And it brings us back to living in the moment. And so this person who was freaking out, this family member was freaking out because of what they imagined was going to happen. And I said, look, the reality is that God has said not to worry about things. He says it a number of places in scripture. So if he says it, then you can believe it. So there's no need to worry. What in reality, this could be the very best thing that ever happened to you. And if you're going to imagine anything, imagine that the change that's going to occur is going to be the very best thing that ever happened to you. Even though that you right now mentally you can't calculate that, but you can believe it. And W. Clement Stone, I don't know if you're familiar with that name,
Oh,
but he
yeah,
was a
absolutely.
yeah, and he used to refer to himself as an inverse paranoid, and he believed the whole world is out to do me good, as
Oh,
opposed to the whole world is out to get me.
inverse paranoid. I'm writing
Becoming
that
an
down.
inverse paranoid, and that's what I'm talking about. Is if you're going to imagine things, then imagine good things. And again, it's like a muscle. You can train yourself to do that. It's difficult, especially if you've been years and years of always expecting the worst. It's hard to turn a switch, and the next day always expect the best, but it can be done. I mean, you learned how to expect the worst. Why can't you relearn how to expect the best? And
Absolutely, and I do that. I learned a long time ago, if I'm worrying about something, it's just inviting it in. It's like opening the door and say, "Come on in, wreck my day."
yeah,
But I've also found, in going back to what you were saying just a bit ago, so, well, if you lose your job, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to tell you straight out, nature abhors a vacuum. Sometimes getting rid of, maybe it's, something that's really bugging you in your life. Maybe it's making you money, maybe it's part of your job, but it's just constantly in the back of your head going, ow, 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 ow. Nature abhors a vacuum. Once you get rid of that, something else better pops up every single time.
yeah. And I mean, if for no other reason, everyone's had this experience where you look back on something that at the time was viewed as devastating.
Yeah,
And
catastrophic, but it wasn't.
no, and you look back and you go, you know what? There was, I can't believe I was freaking out so much, because had that not happened, this wouldn't have happened. And this ended up
Right.
being the best thing ever for me.
That's
So I
exactly
think that
right.
if you can sit and just focus on that, I mean, the Bible is full of that with the children of Israel. I mean, it's like the whole Old Testament is really about just think of what's already happened for you. Quit grumbling, and so I think that you can learn that, and
You can.
but it has to be intentional. You have to decide,
Right.
I'm going to take control of this.
John, thank you again so much for sharing your fascinating journey and insights with us. But before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or messages that you'd like to leave with our audience? And where can they find more about your work and connect with you?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me today. I've really enjoyed visiting with you. I enjoyed our previous discussions. And if there's ever anything I can do to help, please let me know. I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you.
Um, you bet. As far as final thoughts, I think the thing I would try to leave with the audience is that you can have, you can really have the life you want, but you've got to figure out what that is. And then you've got to start moving towards it and be intentional about that. Don't wait till you become an expert in something. Don't wait till you get better at doing something. Just start today. And even if it's a little thing, start. If you want to get more healthy, then start. If nothing else, pick up an article or a book on health and just get started. People oftentimes wait until they have accomplished something that they think is necessary to be good at or to be knowledgeable. And you don't, you can't wait. You got to start. As far as getting in touch with me, probably one of the easiest ways would be my LinkedIn profile, John D. Marvin. You can find me by just searching that. And I have two things I have on that profile, a link that you can use to schedule a phone call with me. And if you want to, just schedule it, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to visit. And also our company website, tso.com, the contact us portion of that you could use. I and my assistant look at that every day, and I'll respond to people there too. So it's much easier than trying to remember an email address I might give you at this point. So, but if
Yeah,
you'll
it
reach
is.
out in each of those venues, LinkedIn or company website, I will respond to you. I promise.
Well, thank you. Listen, it has been a genuine pleasure talking with you. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in to this truly inspiring conversation with John D. Marvin. He is the president and CEO of Texas State Optical, and he just gave you his website, tso.com, I believe. And
Mhm.
today, John shared invaluable insights on leadership, mindset, and personal growth, reminding us that our thoughts are the foundation of our success. And I believe that from the bottom of my toes. So, from transforming TSO into a retail powerhouse to empowering young optometrists, John's journey is a testament to the power of influence, faith, and strategic decision making and gratitude. Let's not forget gratitude. So, if you found John's story and advice impactful, we invite you to take the next step. Go find him on LinkedIn and on his website, and then subscribe to this podcast at yourpartnerinsuccessradio.com or on Apple or anywhere really that you download and listen to your podcasts, because we have more conversations with visionary leaders who are shaping industries and inspiring change to share every week. John, again, thank you so much. It has been a genuine pleasure.
Thank you, Denise. You have a great day.
You too.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.